So today I'm going to regale you with a story from long time ago when I was in my youth. As a young man in my 20s, I was in the service of the United States Army stationed at Fort Rucker, Alabama. We called it Mother Rucker. I was a helicopter instructor pilot, and Fort Rucker being the home of Army aviation, I had two full-time students to teach. It had its ups, it had its downs. And if you've ever been in a helicopter, it also had its sidewards and right and left and right and left until, okay, you get what I mean. Okay, back to reality. Way down in UCLA, that's the upper corner of lower Alabama, flying with a helicopter strapped to my back. It was hot and humid. Days down in the deep south. You know what I mean if you've ever been down there. It was a typical day, as memory serves, and after about a 2-hour first training flight, followed by a refuel in Troy, Alabama, where they open up the soda machines and they have a hot dog machine cooker, not to mention having the hottest college girls there to run your fuel cards. But yeah, it was the free food and drinks that were the main attractions at this airport. But I digress. The flight period went off as expected, 2 hours long, until we were inbound on the flight corridor, the Northwest flight corridor, inbound to the home field at Low Army Airfield at Fort Rucker. This corridor is flown by over 150 helicopters every day. Some at a fairly low level and others at altitude. If you're coming inbound, you're at altitude. If you're going outbound, you're low level. So you have altitude to separate the two, but it's used very, very frequently. And it is known to annoy some country farmers who have been known to brandish firearms or even, take a couple of shots in the air. I mean, so on your maps, you outline that with a 1 kilometer circle around each one of them, and it's called shooter. So if anybody brandishes a firearm, it automatically gets a 1 kilometer circle around it, and that's a no-fly area, and it is labeled shooter on that circle. Okay? You with me so far? So this no-fly area, this 1 kilometer circle that is annotated with shooter, is permanently put on the hazards map. And every student copies the hazards map verbatim. Okay, it is a duplicate of what is stored at the home field there. Needless to say, there's multiple shooter rings all over in this area because, well, you're dealing with farmers from Alabama and they don't like to have their chickens disturbed, even though there's helicopters flying there day and night. Those chickens have grown up with that kind of stuff, and cows and horses have grown up with that kind of stuff for years and years and years, decades even. I called inbound on the corridor and was flying at about an altitude of 800 feet, mean sea level, or about 500 feet above the ground. And about a mile away from the last checkpoint going inbound, the final reporting point, something happened that would change the flight and that day forever. As we flew, fat, dumb, and happy. Fat because we were well fed, dumb because it was a no-brainer to fly a route we had flown several hundred times, or at least I had, and happy because we were almost done for the day. The mood suddenly changed. There I was, flying, I'm sure, with my hand out the door, flying my hand up and down, relaxing and kicked back, and suddenly, bam! The concussion of the shot hit my chest like a hearty slap, and I said, "What was that? Did you feel that?" I asked the student. And of course, not surprisingly, he said, "Well, no, I didn't feel anything," and totally unexpectedly. So I just said, "Okay, I have the controls," and I took the controls and instinctively, and as God is my witness, dove that aircraft down to the trees. Now, again, what I told you is that coming inbound, you're at 800 feet. Going outbound, you're at treetop level, or just above that, your contour flight. And I zipped it on down as quick as I could because I just knew that we had just taken a bullet. I heard like a popcorn kernel go pop, and I felt a thump on my chest, like an overpressurization. So I knew something had gone through. At least I felt like it did. I knew that there was a known shooter area just off to the left, and this just kind of freaked me out. I then started looking around to see if there was a bullet hole that I could see, and I told the student, monitor the instruments, watch. So he started looking at the instruments and whatnot, and I was starting to feel like, well, maybe I just hit a bird or something. And I was trying not to believe that we had actually taken a round to the aircraft, because I didn't want to really believe that. So I started to kind of believe that, well, maybe it was a bird that hit, and I heard that thump, and it was a big enough bird where it kind of caused a little bit of a pop. I was trying to make up stories in my head because I just didn't want to believe that it was a bullet that had come through the cockpit. I took my finger, which was hovering right above the communications, the radio button, and I kind of moved it off to the side going, no, I really don't want to hit the radio and just start shouting, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, taking fire in the Northwest Corridor." Because over the radio, that would be like kicking a bald hornet's nest, at the same time throwing a whole bag full of poo into a gigantic fan. I mean, the whole place would just erupt. An aircraft taking fire in the Northwest Corridor, their heads would explode. And I know my head was about ready to explode, but I didn't want to cause that kind of mayhem if I couldn't confirm it. So the student was monitoring the instruments, right? And I was concentrating on flying the aircraft, zipping through the trees and whatnot, trying to make my way into the airport. And the student said, "Hey, Mr. Anderson, what's that on the instruments?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "There's droplets on the instruments." And I'm looking, and there's like these little raindrops, tiny, when it sprinkles and it's on glass, little tiny droplets like that. That's what it looked like. And he says, "And it's coming from over your shoulder." At that moment, I look, and here are these clear liquid coming from over my shoulder. The wind is kicking it up, and it's coming from over my shoulder, and it's coming down on the instrument panel. I'm thinking, my God, they shot a fuel line, or some kind of fuel is leaking. Again, I was ready to mash on that doggone transmit. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, taking fire in the Northwest Corridor, fuel leaking, making an emergency approach and landing, get crash rescue going." And my first thought was, we're gonna die. This is fuel. There is nothing that's clear like this on the aircraft. This is a fuel line. It is going to go poof in just moments, and we are all going to die in a big, huge, fiery crash bomb. When you're in situations like this, it almost seems like time slows down, and you start thinking about your training, and for whatever reason, popped into my head the training about refuel accidents, and the guy that they were doing hot refuel, and the closed circuit refueling popped out, and it sprayed up into the rotor system. Of course, it's hot refuel, so the engine's still running. The exhaust caught it on fire, and he went up into a big fireball, and he had a fairly burnt looking face and appearance, and these kind of things just race through your head, and you just don't want to be that person in that situation. How could this happen to me? So, you know, again, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't bring myself to believe it. So I yelled at the student to, well, sniff it, because I know that diesel fuel, this is Jet A fuel is a high grade of diesel fuel, so it's going to smell a little bit like diesel fuel. So I said, smell it, and he's like struggling. So he's struggling to get forward. He's got his shoulder harnesses on, and it keeps locking, and he can't get far enough forward because he's trying to put his nose up towards the dash to smell this damn instrument, to make the droplets that are on it, to see if it's actually diesel, and he can't get forward. So I'm like, oh my God. So I just reach forward and wipe it with my finger, and I sniff it. And I was like, jet fuel should smell like kerosene. It shouldn't smell like sweet water. What is going on here? And I'm thinking to myself, what other liquid inside the aircraft could this be? We don't have antifreeze or anything else that would even resemble this kind of stuff, let alone it sure doesn't smell like kerosene. Am I going crazy? So I'm going over in my head, what the heck could this be? And it finally dawns on me, and I'm sure that my face gets pretty bright red, and I start calming down, and I start picking the aircraft back up to corridor altitude, and I tell the student, you have the controls. And he's still amped up. He doesn't know what it is. He's like, what's going on? I'm just shaking my head. I'll tell you when we land. Just relax. Let's just take me back to the pad. Oh, what an awful feeling of embarrassment that came over me that day. So when we landed, my ALSI vest, it's a aviation life support equipment vest, ALSI. In the radio pouch, which we didn't carry emergency radios because there's 50 of us out there, we could easily, contact each other if we had a problem with the aircraft. While I was at Troy Airfield, I had grabbed a soda out of the machine, a Sprite, and put it in my vest. And of course, with the helicopter shaking the whole way and it being hot and humid, the damn thing blew up. And all of this started foaming and coming out, and liquid. It was not very funny at the time. So the time I came back and landed and everything was okay, most of the other instructors had already left. So I'm like, okay, whatever, that's fine, So the next day I come in and we're doing our normal instructor pilots meeting, half hour before the students arrive, and we get to safety tip. And so I say, well, I guess you guys have already heard that I took fire bullets in the aircraft coming in the Northwest Corridor yesterday. They're like, what? We didn't hear anything. What? That's crazy. You did what happened? And they're just like freaking out. And I'm kind of like in the back of my mind going, boo, I gotcha. So I tell them this whole story, and they're just like eyes open crazy. And then I pull out this can. It's empty with the top part of it popped out of it. And here's this can. And I put it on my table, and they're just having a good old chuckle about it. So the students finally come in, and they get to have their half-hour, briefing where we go over the student questions and then safety tip of the day. And I have my student that was with me give the safety tip of the day, which was, again, I got to relive that embarrassing moment again. But by this time, it was funny, okay? So I wanted to keep that can around. I was going to save it, and all of a sudden, it disappeared. And I thought, damn it. Somebody went around and cleaned up, and they took that can and threw it in recycling because they saw it was an empty can laying on the desk. Man, I wanted to keep that. But lo and behold, about a couple of weeks later, when the students were graduating, they presented me with a plaque that had the can glued to the plaque, and it said, thank you for all the awesome instruction and the near-death experiences in the course. I could have just shot those guys. But anyway, that is my true story of what happened to me. Just one of the things that happened to me at Fort Rucker. Well, I see I've taken up quite a bit of time and I've gone over my normal time frame, but I just had to tell that really funny story. I hope that you stayed till the end. If you're watching this, you did, and thank you so very much. If you like this story, smash on that like button. Until next time, I'm Dave Anderson signing out. You guys be safe out there, and God bless.